Welcome to Dublin.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be there.
Absolutely, and I'll come back to why you're not actually here in person sometime in a few minutes' time. So yeah, I'm going to ask you a bunch of stuff. I think it's rather a good thing that we ended up with me interviewing you today. It's going to be fun. I'm going to start with the obvious, tedious question: how did you get this way? In other words. Specifically, how and when did you get interested in aging as a topic in general, and then how did you get interested in applying that knowledge to yourself?
At the age of 21, I returned from having been in Ecuador for 2 years. I lived among extreme poverty, dirt floors, mud huts, and it was such a shocking contrast to what I was accustomed to in the United States. When I came back, the only thing that I wanted to do was spend my life trying to improve the human race. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have any skills of note. And so I decided that I would try to make a whole bunch of money by the age of 30. And then at that time, try to figure out something to do to be useful.
All right. So that's how you decided you wanted to change the world in some good way. But why and when aging in particular?
After I sold Braintree Venmo, I spent several years trying to figure out if I could put my finger on one thing, not two, just one, that would have a measurable impact. And what I tried to do as a thought experiment is I imagined being present in the 25th century. And whatever form of intelligence exists then, they're ruminating on the early 21st century. And they're marveling at what we did in our time and place that changed the trajectory of intelligence. And to me, it seemed like it was our ability to extend our lifespans and bring to an end of inevitable death, which was common among every generation before us.
Yeah, so, to an audience like the people we have here in the room, that resonates very well, I'm very sure. It's like, very much what we all think, I think. So that's rather a contrast to the way that you are typically portrayed in the media these days as being very unlike almost everybody else in the world. Let's talk about that a little bit. So, of course, what you ended up deciding to do in terms of yourself is to make use of your resources, to do absolutely everything you could to postpone your own aging. And I know that, that started a good couple of years ago now. It's much more recently that you've really come to the attention of the wider world. So I guess I'm going to ask, pretty much everyone here knows the concept of, the blueprint thing, and they've probably looked at your website and so on. So I'm going to try and focus on perhaps slightly off-the-wall questions, or at least slightly unusual ones. But the first one, I think, is a simple one. It's kind of a 40,000-foot one about how you go about all of this. How do you decide what to do? How do you decide what to eat? How do you decide how often to have a particular test, and so
on? I guess the way I think about it, and I'd say the way my team members think about it may be slightly differently, but this is how I think of it. For the past few 100,000 years, humans have been the superior form of intelligence on this earth. And recently, computational systems of intelligence, humans paired up with machine learning and data and science, have proven to be superior to the human mind alone in precision decision making. And in contemplating my own well-being and how I could potentially transcend what I could do as an individual, I wondered if we could build a computational system of intelligence that takes better care of me than I can myself. An intelligence that would transcend my natural abilities. And so the fundamental building blocks of that would be, could I measure my body enough? And I don't think we know what too much or too little or just right as yet. Just can we hit some threshold of measurement relevance across whole body that would generate enough data for us to then apply the available science and then repeat that protocol, that process repeatedly on a continuous loop. And could we do that? And could we peg our objectives to data that we consider to be reliable in terms of all-cause mortality? And that's what we've been trying to do, is I've tried to remove myself as the primary system of intelligence, moving to computational forms in this algorithm that we've built through measurement and scientific evidence, and then the continuous loop.
Yeah, that's a very clear answer. And your team you mentioned, so that's like, I think you mentioned last time we met, that's 30 people, something like that?
That's right.
Can you give a summary of the kind of skill sets those people have?
Yeah, we've been trying to tackle this really from an organ perspective. So we'll take, for example, we'll focus on the heart and we'll find a cardiologist that we can identify for the therapies. We'll work with someone on the MRI. We'll identify someone who's good at doing echoes with ultrasound. And so we'll try to take it by a technology and or discipline, and then we build up the team accordingly. And we try to cover as much of the body as we can with the expertise.
Yeah. And coming back to the cycle of measuring and adapting and optimizing, I mean, of course, some ways of measuring things in the body are the measurement process introduces damage, radiation, for example. So, yeah, I mean, how often do you do a full-body MRI, for example?
We do quite a bit of MRI. I would say I'm probably in an MRI machine once every 2 weeks right now. And our primary modalities are biofluids, ultrasound, MRI, devices, and fitness tests.
See, right, yeah. Okay, so I want to ask you about sleep. For everybody who didn't understand what I was saying about why Bryan's not here in person, last time you and I met, you mentioned that you've completely given up flying anywhere that's across more than 2 time zones, so as to not disrupt the constancy of your sleep schedule. I think I have that right. So yeah, I know that you take your sleep schedule very seriously indeed. Can you explain why?
Yeah, the game I'm trying to play, above all, is mustering soberness of thought. And so my limited capacity as a human, if I, again, time travel to the 25th century, and I guess my education primarily comes from biographies, reading of people in time and place throughout the centuries who were able to identify things that were otherwise invisible to their generation, or not pursued because they were impossibly hard to do. And in this time and place, my aspiration as an individual is to try to achieve soberness of thought. And there's nothing in my life that changes my conscious experience and soberness of thought more than sleep. I find that even a single night's sleep degrades my mental processes substantially, so I can't find that kind of clarity. And so to me, in my pursuit, I'm trying to, I'm searching for the invisible, and I can't do that on less than ideal sleep.
I see, yeah. Okay, yeah, we'll come back to that when I ask you about the relationship of what you're doing to what other people might want to do to achieve the same goal for themselves. And the context, you probably don't know, is that, this meeting emphasizes the recreational components of interactions at conferences, and there's been a lot of partying. And a lot of people here have had an amount of sleep over the past few days that would horrify you. So actually, I mean, a lot of people would say, I guess, that, prioritizing clarity of thought, as you said, over partying is quite a decision. And perhaps in general, I think, to broaden that, I think in general, people might say, even forgetting about the financial cost to you of doing all of this, that you must be a pretty monomaniacal person. So I was wondering, do you view yourself as monomaniacal or not?
One of the things that I think is potentially invisible right now is our acceptance of death. Mm-hmm. It's always happened. We believe it to be inevitable. Even when you look on the horizon right now, you cannot see how we arrive at being able to eliminate death in any time frame that is relevant for any of us. And so the revolution that we have ahead of us is we've been on this planet, the planet has existed for a few billion years. We are baby steps away from superintelligence. When that arrives, we do not have the capacity to model out what's going to happen. It's a complete wall. In the 19th century, it would have been reasonable for someone to say, live a little, party, have fun. That's basically the ideology of death. You're saying that my death is inevitable. I might as well engage in these activities that produce these biochemical states in my body, which I map to joy. I don't think that that is a life philosophy that matches to the 21st century, the time we are in. I think the clarity in this moment is, with being baby steps away from superintelligence, the most tragic outcome of all would be to not be included in the future we're walking into. And it requires an entire reconstruction of one's psychology about what it means to live, what is meaning making, what is the meaning of life, how to acquire joy. And my sole purpose is to be able to walk into this future, what could be the most extraordinary experience of intelligent existence in the history of the galaxy.
Right, yes, absolutely. But then, would you say that the focus on that is probably not going to need to be permanent? In other words, that there will come a point where we have achieved this technology, we've achieved longevity, escape velocity, and partying will be rational again.
Entirely. That's the thing, is that the future, we bump up against a wall of fog. We cannot see it, we cannot model it, we cannot predict it, we just can't see it. Mm-hmm. The only thing that matters is being around for it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer, yeah. Okay, so I mentioned I was going to come back to the relevance of what you're doing to other people. And of course, I'm aware that there's a reason why you have come out of the closet, so to speak, and made yourself available to the media extensively, even though a lot of them try to ridicule you. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you're doing with Blueprint in terms of giving people not only updates and league tables and so on, but rather guidance as to how people with more limited resources can follow your lead in some way.
Yeah, there's a few layers to Blueprint. First of all, hi everyone at the conference. It's nice to be among you. I know some of you, I don't know all of you, but I do want to express my appreciation for you, that the games I get to play right now are because of the hard work you've done. And so thank you. I appreciate you. I mean, the few layers of Blueprint is, a person can look at what I do, the supplements and the diet and the sleep, and they can take the best parts of it for their life. That's great. What I'm really trying to do with Blueprint is I'm trying to introduce the conversation about death and about life. And it's counterintuitive. You wouldn't think that conversation has to do with measuring nighttime erections. You wouldn't think it's focused shockwave therapy for penis rejuvenation. You wouldn't think it's about blood transfusions. But that's exactly the language that is being used to understand death and life and meaning and climate change and care for each other. We need to figure out, above all, the simple thing of how do we not die? Not die individually, not kill each other, not destroy our biosphere, and not underestimate how to align with AI. The only thing on our to-do list as a species is don't die. And we need to somehow figure out how to introduce this conversation so it's understandable. Now, in the early days, it's going to be rickety, like you've seen in the media. These are brand new ideas. But this is my best effort on how to take a 25th century perspective and say, what did we as a group in the 21st century do that was remarkable, that would stand the test of time?
Brilliant. Okay, before I open this up for questions from those gathered here, I thought I would mention another of your major activities outside of Blueprint, which is Kernel. Of course, I'm aware that it's a business that's progressing very rapidly in terms of technology, but that you have a bridge round of $5 million open right now. There are some investors in the audience, so I think they're probably going to be interested to hear more about it. So can you give a brief overview of what Kernel does, what it's about to do, the future of Kernel?
Yeah, the basic idea, if you buy a washer and dryer, you don't have to think about whether it's going to fit through your front door. You know it's going to. Society has built standards so that people who build doors know the size of doors to build, and people who build washer and dryers know it. So when society has numbers, we build around it, we engineer around it. The same thing in buying a car. You don't think if your car is going to fit through the lanes, you just know it's going to. And so the idea behind Kernel was, could we measure our brains at scale? And if we could we re-scaffold society around our brains and our minds? So for example, what does social media do for our brain and minds? What about our relationships? What about work? What about education and sleep and these dietary protocols and these drugs and cognitive decline? The hundreds of questions that relate to our mind. And to me, that's why I started Kernel, it's almost 7 years now, is I pose this question, is there a technology in existence that we could build that would get brain and mind measurement to the masses to re-scaffold society around that? And we succeeded. We built a technology that I think most everyone in the field thought was impossible. It's up and going. We're now doing some clinical work, and we're very close to some biomarkers looking at cognitive decline and other psychiatric conditions. So I'm excited. I mean, it was a really challenging project. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished, and it could be the first mass market device ever built to measure brain.
Yeah, and just in 2 words, the device in question is essentially a wearable fMRI machine. It's it's quite a breakthrough. I completely agree. And just to summarize my understanding anyway, the unit cost of these things is going to be fairly daunting for individuals, but not for big companies. And so the plan is that the first market for this will be big pharma, people who can make use of this kind of information to streamline the drug development and testing process, if I have that right. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's an extremely smart strategy for getting something out there in the as quickly as possible and making a big benefit to humanity in terms of accelerating drug development as well as making a viable business. Right, so yes, I think I would like to turn this over to the audience. I guess there are roving mics. Is there anyone? Yes. Bloody hell. I don't know whether you can see the audience, Bryan, but there are lots of hands up. That one first.
Hello, Bryan. I have to say, I really appreciate what you do. As I say to my friends, I totally vibe with the thing you do. And I totally like the blueprint, and I wish I could follow it, but it's a bit complicated, especially when we live in a time of one click, And in one of your interviews, you mentioned that you make a payment system in one click. So I want to ask, is there any future to blueprints that we can have it in one click? Like, are you planning to collaborate with something like HelloFresh or Uber Eats, that I just can open my phone and in one click order delicious and nice food, or my supplements would be adjust to your protocol without me really spending time and involving it? And second question, if is the future, can I have contact from Aubrey and present you my ideas how I see the longevity economy of the future, and maybe you're going to implement it to make it easier for all of us?
I would love to hear about your ideas. My favorite part has been listening to what the longevity community has to offer. I mean, there's decades of thought that is immensely valuable, so I'd love to hear them. Yes. Just to make a clarification of what you're talking about, the one click, when I was building Braintree Venmo, there was a big problem with payments where when you held a taxi cab, you would arrive at your destination and they would pull out either a carbon copy machine or the actual machine with a Wi-Fi connection. And then you'd go through this janky process of the credit card being swiped and then a Wi-Fi connection being lost and then a credit card being printed. Everyone hated the experience. It never worked, and it was painful. And so we worked with Uber when they were exploding, and we made the payment experience disappear. So you loaded a credit card in the app, it was stored in the Braintree servers. You got in the car, the tip was already preloaded. You arrived at the destination and left your car. Payment just disappeared. It was magic. And then everyone across the landscape implemented that process, and payments just kind of became a thing that was just this autonomous function. And that's really what I've been trying to do with Blueprint. Is I realize the barriers to implement Blueprint are substantial. And some people can do some portions of it. It's very hard to do all of it. And solving this sort of global scale is quite the project. More than anything, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to demonstrate a point that ideal health should be a default in society. We shouldn't have to fight for that in our daily lives. And if you look at our current levels of insanity, you take any individual in the United States, and within a few miles of them, there's a few dozen fast food places, there's a few dozen places selling sugary drinks. The person has omnipresent access to a phone, of digital addictions, of porn, and of other things. You have grocery stores, which are basically casinos. We've built a society addicted to addiction. And it is entirely unreasonable for us to expect anybody to be able to withstand that and have the discipline to overcome it. We as a society we're not setting ourselves up for success by doing this. And Blueprint is trying to create a contrast for how systems are today to show something that could be in the future. Now, in the meantime, I get emails every single day from dozens of entrepreneurs building out exactly this. So whether it be food delivery services or whether it be certain testing protocols, the ecosystem, as you all know, is vibrant and increasing. So it seems like this is the moment. And so I'm bullish that all of us together can build this infrastructure that makes ideal health invisible. It just happens somehow. We don't know how. But we transition out of this poisonous state we're in society right now, where we're on this roller coaster of dopamine.
All right, next question. Who's near the front? There we go.
Thank you very much, and I deeply admire your courage and integrity for being able to explicitly state your opposition to death and your priority as being not dying. It would seem to me that if the majority of prominent business leaders, entertainers, politicians, other public figures made a similar declaration, our society would be changed and we would all be galvanized to take the steps toward not dying. But it does seem that many people in positions of prominence feel constrained to say what you just said, even though some of them might be sympathetic. Some of them might even be pouring many millions of dollars into longevity research. So what would you consider these constraints to be? And how would you recommend at least gradually alleviating them, making more of your peers more comfortable in expressing the sentiments that you expressed?
Well, there you go. Gennady has stumped him.
You know, I wonder if the friction is what we need to succeed. I wonder if the elites or those in the power, if they maintain the status quo in the face of what will increasingly become a compelling argument that we have the ability to meaningfully slow our speed of aging and reverse aging damage, if that creates the kindling for the revolution we need.
Yep.
We're trying to snap the spell,
Yeah.
and I don't expect it's going to be easy.
Leslie, you have a question?
I do. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Try and be brief. I know everyone does. Thank you so much for what you do for all of us. Thank you for being willing to be an N of one and to be the ultimate patient advocate for all of us. And what I'd love to know is how we can help you, but not because the end goal is to help you feel good about what you're doing, but because if you get the recognition that you need and are defined the way that is best for getting your message out there, that's better for all of us. So my question for you is, what can we do for you to get your message out? What are the top 2 or 3 things you want us to say about you, other than, oh my gosh, he's so amazing and cool and smart? What would you like us to say? Thank you.
And before you answer, Bryan, I should let you know that the person who asked the question is Melissa King, who is the chair of LEV Foundation's board of directors, and perhaps more importantly, or more relevantly, is also the chief operating officer at our sister organization, the Health Span Action Coalition.
How generous and kind of you. Thank you. Deeply appreciate that. A few things. One is, for all of you there, I come in peace. I'm grateful for you. I want to be a part of the community. And I hope you understand that the things I do, I'm trying to speak the language of the world today. And that language is a little bit in, maybe I would say, it's in the category of absurdism. It's not in in scientific papers. It's not in your face rational argument. It's a nuanced concoction of absurdism, humor, and a bunch of other things mixed in, this weird concoction. And I'm not trying to, so I guess in short, I'd say your support in the endeavor of defeating death, we're aligned. And so I'm not trying to undermine anything you're doing. I'm not trying to challenge anything you're working on. I really am in alignment with what you're trying to do. So I just appreciate the support. You're locked together, don't die.
So I probably only have time for one more question. Right there in the aisle, because that's the easiest one for the microphone to get to.
Hi, Bryan. My name is Felix, and again, as everyone else, huge thank you for all the work you do. You influence a lot of people who are maybe not from the longevity space to actually get interested into longevity, like myself. So massive thanks for that. What I'm really dying to know is, because I saw it in one of your videos, besides the physical improvements, you also mentioned that you had significant mental improvements, or like improvements in your mental health with your Blueprint program. And I really would like to know, are there specific parts of the program which basically resulted in that? And also, what is your opinion, if you had these improvements, on how we treat mental health nowadays?
Yeah, my health is probably the most improved marker. And the thing I've done with Blueprint is I've really tried to stay tight in speaking about things I can measure and I can share. I've tried to stay away from things that are qualitative in nature because they're more controversial, and it's easy for someone to roll up and try to claim authority in the conversation. And the mental markers, there haven't been good things. Like we know, for example, that questionnaires are the primary measurement modality. You can do some things like MRI, looking at structural, and some fMRI. What Kernel's been trying to do is looking at functional things. But I do want to speak more about this publicly and with measurement. But I would say from a qualitative perspective, my mental well-being is the #1 improvement I've had in my entire life. I struggled with chronic depression for a decade. I was in other times in my life in a pretty unpleasant time, and I've never been more stable with greater resilience to all sorts of disturbances in my entire life. And it's probably a combination of sleep, the good diet that I have, and the consistency, where previously I was on this roller coaster chasing my next hit all the time, whether it be in food or some other kind of stimuli. And I think for the first time in my entire life, I have finally figured out a mental state that is permanently enjoyable.
Well, thanks, Bryan. Yeah, so I wish we didn't have to end now, but as you can see, all of you, Bryan is a spectacularly open, authentic person, and he's truly one of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.